You remember a number of months ago, the World Bank and the IMF, oh, come on now. You've got to pick some buzzwords out. These are so important to your life and to your dinner table, you can't imagine it. You remember about 3-4 months ago, the World Bank and the IMF said, oh, and they made themselves look so good. They said, we're going to forgive the loans of every third world country and every nation, every third world nation in the world. We're going to forgive their loans. Oh, didn't they look like such benevolent people? No, not on your life. First thing I thought in my mind was, come on now. Nobody forgives a loan unless somebody pays for it. They weren't doing you a favor. You know who paid off the loans of every third world country? You know who paid them off? You did. And you did. And you did, and I did. Where? At the gas pump. You don't know this. I would have never known it had I not sat in their board meetings, had I not rubbed shoulders with them, sat across the dinner table from them. Most authors would have given anything to be able to even rub shoulders with these people one time. I lived with them for 3 years. I don't have to research somebody else's material and write a book. I wrote a book from what I lived for 3 years' time, and I'm here to tell you so you can save your family and your dinner table, and we can help turn America around. Who are they? Saudi Arabia, any oil-producing country of the world. They sell their oil to the men who sit behind the computers in New York and London every day, and they're representatives of the World Bank and the IMF, and they're the ones that make the difference between what Saudi Arabia gets a barrel of oil out of the ground. You know how much Saudi Arabia, how much it cost them to get a barrel of oil out of the ground? It cost them $5. Who's making that between that and $70 a barrel? They sell it to the oil bourse. Their representatives sit behind the computers in New York and London. They tell everybody on the face of the earth what they're going to give them for a barrel of oil for that day. OPEC has nothing to do with it. Shell Oil Company has nothing to do with it. You don't have anything to do with it. Price and demand has nothing to do with it. It's controlled by the men who sit behind the computers in New York and London every day. They're representatives of the World Bank and the IMF, and they take the big cut right off the top before the oil company ever gets theirs, and they could forgive the loans of every third world country because you paid for it at the gas pump, and it's an atrocity. And if the world ever wakes up, they're going to overthrow the powers that be, and the people will be we the people again. Now I'll give you the details. During the administration of President Carter, there was a man by the name of Mr. Henry Kissinger. He went to every leading oil-producing country in the world, and he said, I'd like to cut you a deal. And they said, what? He said, we will send America's oil companies over to produce your fields. We'll make you rich. You'll be the wealthiest people on the face of the earth. You must sign on the dotted line to do two things. You may have heard this. Very few have. I would not had I not been there. You must do two things. Number one, you must denominate all oil sales in American dollars. Since 1960 and the inception of the great oil boom, all oil sales have been done in American dollars. Watch this carefully. You've got to know what to do when you go back to those booths over there in the exhibit room, and you'd better do it today. Number one, you must denominate all oil sales in American dollars. Number two, they said, what's that? We like the first one, solid as a dollar. You remember those days? What's number two? He said, you must take a certain percentage. I wish I knew that percentage. Somehow I missed it back in those days. He said, you must take a certain percentage of everything we buy oil from you with, and you must turn around and invest it in American T-bills and securities. Basically, in a nutshell, the oil-producing countries of the world would buy our national debt, $9 trillion. Watch out. Something has happened. Before I go into what has happened, may I say that two nations wouldn't sign on the dotted line. Who were they? Iraq, and Iran. A man appeared with me on a radio talk show the other day. Write his name down. It'll also be on the camera today. His name is Abner Dethridge. He was the man, one of the men sent by the State Department of the United States of America to Saddam Hussein back in February through March of 1990 and said, if you invade Kuwait, the State Department and the United States of America will do nothing about it. It was a setup. It was a trap. Saddam didn't know it. Saddam had to be destroyed because he wouldn't sign on this dotted line. That's the only reason. There are a lot of people in the world that have murdered more people than Saddam Hussein did. I'm not taking up for him. I know he was a wicked man, but I'm telling you the facts. And here he did. What did he do? You remember that Kuwait had been a part of Iraq prior to the last war, and when the world was divided up after the last war by the powers that be, Kuwait was taken away from Iraq. And so so Saddam said, I want Iraq back. He went and invaded it on August the 1st, 1990, and immediately after that, who came down on him? Why? It was a setup. All President Bush Sr. wanted was an excuse to invade Saddam to get back at him because Saddam was not willing to sign on the dotted line in the days of Henry Kissinger. What was the second nation that was not willing to sign on the dotted line? Iran. It's not nuclear. What's happening in Iran has nothing at all to do with nuclear. Iran is years away from producing a nuclear bomb. Why are we using nuclear as an excuse to invade Iran or to do something about Iran or put sanctions on Iran? North Korea has the bomb. China has the bomb. On and on and on. Israel. You could go on and on with the countries that have the bomb. Why have we singled out Iran, who doesn't even have one yet? Because Iran would not sign on the dotted line in the days of Mr. Henry Kissinger, and they must be destroyed at any price, even if you Americans have to pay the lives of your sons to go there and do it. Listen to what Major General Smedley Butler said. President Eisenhower one time was asked, it was stated, Mr. Eisenhower, you are very similar to Smedley Butler. Eisenhower replied, I wish I were half the man Smedley Butler is. He was a general who told the truth. Listen to a statement. War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge profits. He said it in his book. Now, there was an unexpected problem that arose. It has arisen within the past 90 days. A number of nations have said, you remember the American dollar has always been used for the sale of oil. Well, something has happened in the past 90 days that the powers that be never expected. It was not supposed to happen. Even they, the World Bank and the IMF and our president and vice president, who are all men, are shaking in their shoes today. I don't know how they sleep at night because they are between a rock and a hard place. Something is about to happen, and it's drastic. These nations jumped ship within the past 90 days. On March the 20th, Iran said, we're going to establish our own bourse. That's bank. We are not going to use New York banks and the American dollar for the sale of oil anymore. Iran is 5% of the world's oil supply, the third largest oil field in the world, and the fifth largest supplier and exporter to the world. And Iran said, we're not going to use the American dollar anymore. Forget it. We don't trust your $9 trillion national debt. We're not going to hold your securities any longer. We no longer will use the American dollar. And as of March the 20th, they jumped ship. Then Venezuela came along. Chavez. Oh, I know, he's a communist. I don't necessarily care for his ways, but he was big enough to buck the president. And he said, we're not going to use your dollar anymore either. We're going to establish our own bourse. Then Syria jumped ship. Oh no, Syria's not an oil country. A lot of money goes through it though. Syria said, we're not using the dollar anymore. Then Nigeria, 2.8% of the world's oil supply. They ran Shell Oil Company out. They said, when we can put our oil fields back to work again, we're not going to use the American dollar anymore. Norway, come on, I hope you're writing these down. Norway, little insignificant country. Oh, you say, what do they have to do with it? They supply all of the Scandinavian world with oil on any given day. The world's third largest oil supply. They said, we're going to diversify.